This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 584 for November 17th, 2019. Coming up on today's show, dealing with abandonment issues. That's coming up on today's show. And we are, as always, your co-hosts. I'm Minx.
And I am lustyguy, happy and lucky to be here as always. This is an adult show about really lascivious things like honesty and communication about sex. If you're under 18, please stop listening and visit scarletteen.com.
It's actually been a while since our last episode, a little bit later than anticipated, but just want to give one more shout out to our hosts at the Close In Munch in Portland a few weeks ago. Had a great time. If you've been listening to the podcast and are subscribed, then you heard our live episode from that event. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, great time in Portland, as always, and a lot of really neat people putting together a really cool event.
And we're doing something a little different for our Poly for the Holidays episode this year. I put out a call on Facebook to ask many of our friends who are relationship coaches or therapists to see if they each wanted to record a short segment with their advice for Poly for the Holidays. We had a lot of interest. Looking forward to see what our actual professional friends think and what advice they have. If you are a therapist or a coach or just an experienced poly person who has some advice that you have just been dying to give, email polyweekly@gmail.com with a copy to lustyguy@polyweekly.com, and we'll give you instructions on the due date and how you can get a segment to us for that episode, which will air the first week in December. Did you know that November 23rd was National Polyamory Day? In fact, there are a lot of poly holidays that I never quite realized were official holidays or semi-official until somebody starts posting about them on Facebook. But Alan from the Poly in the News blog has put together a list of all of the poly holidays for the year in a blog post, which we'll link to in the show notes at polyweekly.com or in the show notes section of the podcatcher of your choice.
I love the one that was created with a press release. You know, it makes me think, I wonder if you got like all of the holidays that were created by press release and put them all on a calendar. Like every day, I'll bet you was a holiday for something.
Actually, I did listen to a podcast a while back about how something becomes like National Pizza Day or National Taco Day. And there is a group, although I think it was volunteer and not official, but they're the ones that say yes to that day or no, it's already taken. At any rate, in Alan's article, Polyamory South Africa published a short calendar of poly holidays, such as February 28th is Metamor Day. Did you know this? Because Valentine's Day is February 14th, and if you double the love, then that would be 14 plus 14, that's February 28th. March 11 is Solo Poly Day, which I guess was originally National Singles Day. But hey, I think that works as Solo Poly Day. September 23rd, Bisexuality Day. October 11th, Coming Out Day. And November 23rd is Polyamory Day, which is the anniversary of British Columbia, Canada's 2011 ruling that anti-polygamy laws do not apply to modern polyamorous. Huh, look at that. Another Poly in the News article that several folks sent to me is, did you see this? It was a very small study of poly pregnancy and childbirth experiences. So basically there was a group of Canadian researchers that were looking to see what were the barriers to prenatal, antenatal, and postnatal care for poly families and to share any conclusions of that with healthcare providers and other professionals in the hopes of addressing them somehow. So there were some, to me, really obvious conclusions of the study. Things like more partners means more support and navigating the health system presented challenges. Although I would say this is in Canada, right? So in the U.S., navigating the health system is just a completely different beast and is a horrible, terrible thing, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Canada's a little bit better. At any rate, part of the challenge here is that this was only 24 participants, so it's a pretty small study. It's all based on interviews, so it's based on self-reporting and things like that. So not really significant in terms of research, but interesting all the same.
Yeah, it was really funny. When this topic came up before the show, I, kind of got a grumpy expression on my face about this article. And Minx looked at me and said, let me guess, very small study and self-reporting. And I was like, yep, that's it.
And of course, I still want to mention it just because I think it's interesting and I think it's notable that the study happened at all.
Well, and you're not yet quite as old and grumpy on your front porch and shaking your stick at those young kids like I am.
We're the same age.
It's an attitude. I mean, do you want to argue you're as old and grumpy as I am? Because you can argue you're as old and grumpy as I am if you want. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, call 802-505-POLY or email polyweekly@gmail.com and attach an MP3 file with your questions. To book us or anything that involves a calendar, email lustyguy@polyweekly.com.
Our listener question this week was about dealing with abandonment issues. Our listener, Katie, has abandonment issues, and she's asking how to better cope with them when poly. So she says, I'm having a hard time figuring out my own abandonment issues. I know why they're there, but I don't know what to do for myself or what to ask my partners to do for me when it happens. It's triggered very easily and usually feels like an extreme sense of disconnection from my partner mixed with anger. I have thoughts that go a billion miles an hour trying to figure out what my partner was thinking or why they behaved the way they did and what that all means. My brain reacts like something they did or told me is evidence that they're going to abandon me, and I get pissed about it. And yet a much more logical and quieter voice in the background is like, no, this is your abandonment issues, not them. They've done nothing wrong. Still, my partners can tell I'm angry and ask a lot of leading questions when I get in this state of mind. So the initial reactions and ensuing discussions are usually intense. Coming at the discussion like that often leads to my partners downplaying the issue and getting defensive. Also, sometimes my partners do make mistakes like any normal human, and it's really hard to separate out what is my own shit and what's actually a mistake that someone else made. And she asked for advice.
Well, first of all, I have to say, bravo, digging down into yourself, piecing things apart, and kind of trying to own your own poo.
Yeah.
That's, well done, Katie, right there. One thing now, it seems to me in reading your letter, you may actually be at the point where you are aware that you are triggered and your own issues are coming up while they're coming up. And if so, man, you are more than halfway there. That's like the hard work right there.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong about that, then we'll get to that in a second. But we'll start off that you're right and that you're aware when it's happening. If so, if you can try to frame that event verbally with your partner. So as you're feeling your thoughts wrap up, as you're feeling those, actually this reminds me of the show that we just finished watching that was so good that you need to see. What is it? Fleabag.
Oh, yes.
And Fleabag, one of the things that actually Fleabag taught me about me, one of the things I do all the time is think, okay, why did somebody do that? What does that mean? If they do this next, what are they going to do next? Just like the main character in Fleabag turns to the main audience and takes herself out of the action. That's a way of me doing that too. It's a way of me disassociating. So I don't know if that's true for you, but when you start going through and thinking, why did they do that? What does that mean? If it is a method that you're using to disassociate and pull yourself out of the situation, it might be useful to see it as such. But anyway, that's a little diversion. What you can do, if you're aware of it at the time, is use that same impulse, but frame it with your partner and actually say the words with your partner, I am right now doing that thing where, right? This is a time when. And when you are not having that reaction, enlist them as an ally and say, look, we both know this happens. When I do that, here's what I need you to do. And you need to be very specific. You asked about what can you have your partners do to help you? Well, you can tell them, when I'm having that moment, what I need you to do is be extra patient with me and understand that I'm working through these physical reactions. I'm working through the state of mind that I'm in. And I know that it seems like I'm mad at you and that it's about you, but just indulge me and be patient with me, please, as we work through this together, and try to get them on your side before it happens. And even practice saying those words when you're not having one, when you're not having the reaction. Practice and say to them, okay, we're going to practice right now. So I'm going to look at you and I'm going to say, hey, I'm doing this thing right now. And then you're going to say, oh, okay, got it. I'm going to be extra patient. It's not about me. I'm here to support you. Yay. Now the next step, when you both actually, or all three or whatever, actually manage to put those practices into effect while you're having a moment, reward each other. Look for a chance when your partner has done well to give them a reward for doing well. Whatever kind of cookie works for you and your partner. And obviously with me, I'm going to say sexual things because that's the way my mind works. But it doesn't have to be sex because we all know it's not all about the sex. And finally, understand that you're never going to get it right every time. What you have to do is practice. And that means failing. So do your practice in your mind as much as you can. See yourself in that situation. Visualize yourself. Imagine it. And visualize yourself doing the right thing. Furthermore, review past experiences of it in your mind with the objectivity of a professional athlete looking at tape of their last game. You want to look at yourself and try to say, okay, what could I have done better? Where could I have adjusted myself? What would I like to do next time? And then incorporate that into your mental practice. So visualize yourself, practice in your brain, doing better with those things that you have learned from past experience. And know that you're going to have to practice in the real space as well. You won't always get it right. Forgive yourself and be prepared to iterate. And then finally, you might want to consider actually getting a little bit of professional help. I don't know for sure where you're at on the scale and if that would be helpful, but for me, and I've had to deal with a lot of this kind of stuff. I have a lot of PTSD and in fact, I think we're going to talk about it when Minx takes her turn a little bit with something that's affected her. It's been really helpful for me to get a little professional help from time to time and kind of get me a nudge, as it were, over those things. But basically, bravo. If you are aware of it, try to frame it. If you're not aware of it when it happens, then incorporate that into your mental practice, becoming aware of it. Do that mental and physical practice. Start when you're not having an episode. Hold hands, if that helps you. Look for specific asks from your partners that they can give you, like saying that, hey, I'm having this thing now, be patient, or make sure when you leave me, you let me know when you're going to be coming back, things like that. And forgive yourself. You're doing good, and you're just going to get better.
I agree with all of that advice. And, it actually brought to mind an episode that lustyguy and I experienced recently. So as he's mentioned on several occasions, he had a history of childhood abuse and has had some really terrible things happen to him in his life. And can I reveal what the thing was?
Oh, yeah. And I may flavor the story since I was the one there.
When he was fairly young.
5? Yeah, I was 5 years old.
I thought you were a teenager.
Oh, no, I was 5 years old. We were out riding bikes when I was 5 years old.
Poor lustyguy is 5 years old and sees his cousin hit and killed by a car in front of him as they're walking down the street. Now, as a result of that, when I'm crossing a street or dealing with any type of traffic situation, it's not unusual for lustyguy to get triggered and get upset because he thinks I didn't see that other car, or he knows that other car might not stop, and I'm pretty confident it will because it always had in the past. So, this has happened several times, and I have to admit, I usually have a fairly negative reaction, like, do you really think I don't know how to cross a street? Yes, I saw that car. Oh my God, I'm a grown-ass adult. Pretty negative, actually. Sorry about that. But what's interesting is recently, lustyguy actually told me exactly what's going on in his head when that's happened. And I'm kind of embarrassed that I never asked him this before because I just felt like he was being overprotective. But he actually gave me a description of what he sees flashing before his eyes and his physical reaction, and told me in detail what's happening in his head, how he's trying to talk himself down. And I sat and listened and, well, A, felt really stupid for never asking before, and B, it made me a lot more sympathetic. Now that I knew, instead of his getting angry or impatient with me, or taking it to mean that he thinks that I'm too stupid to know how to cross the street, I realized it is about him, and he's putting all his coping mechanisms to work, and maybe I should just be fucking patient with that. So the solution that I've come to is whenever we're together, I just let him take the lead when we're crossing the street, and I just follow him, even though I'm perfectly capable myself. But I think it makes it less likely that I will trigger that for him, because I certainly don't want to cause him any more angst or anxiety than he already has about that situation.
Which I'll appreciate. And, to be specific, what happened when we were crossing the road and had this moment, or Minx said to me, I feel like you're mad at me. And I said in return, I'm not mad at you. I'm trying to deal with the visualization of seeing my cousin hit and killed with me again. Only it's not her. Now it's you. So I'm trying to deal with the flashback of seeing you ran over in front of me, the massive adrenaline dump that's happening. And I'm trying to get back and center myself and be here now. So what you're seeing is really me trying to control all of these strong emotional reactions. Not that I'm angry at you. It's that I'm really riding these demons inside me. And I know that I can, and I know that I'll get through it. And at this point, I got the 8-second ride down pretty well. But during those 8 seconds, it really, I guess, looks like, I'm furious or whatever. And really, I'm totally inside at that point. It really is all about me.
And it was really helpful for me to know that, because now that I know what's going through his head and what's actually happening, it's a lot easier for me to be compassionate and sympathetic and see what I can do to help. And, lustyguy mentioned in his advice to you, asking your partners for what you need in the moment, doing all that description. There may also be something simpler. In addition to that, something like, I need a hug. I need to be held. I need to, get to a dark corner and just be quiet and alone. I mean, there may be something physically that your partners can do to help you in that moment as well. Once he told me what was actually going on in his head, so much easier for me to provide support in those moments and to take the extra effort of saying, you know what? I think he should just always take the lead when we're crossing the streets. And that way it's much easier to avoid his being triggered at all, which is just a big deal for him to go through. And if I can help him avoid having to go through that again, then I will.
Which I appreciate.
And also in terms of the reinforcement, he does that. So now whenever we cross the street, I just stand back and link my arm in his. And I was like, you go. And then he leads across the street. And when we're on the other side, he says, and thank you. So he gives me the positive reinforcement for my helping him avoid the triggering mechanism. If you have comments on this or anything else we talk about on the show, you can join the community at facebook.com/polyweekly, or you can tweet us on Twitter at polyweekly or at cunningminx.
Our feedback this week comes from Joe. I just listened to your episode, Do Polyfamilies Have to Live Together? I wanted to add a suggestion regarding the listener who asked about finding poly people in rural Pennsylvania. The advice you gave about trying to start a new group is good, but can be daunting, especially for a newbie. I would add to your suggestion that it might be good to find existing poly groups in the nearest cities, like maybe Harrisburg or Scranton. Ooh, Scranton. Even though that, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I've killed myself. Scranton.
And now every listener in Scranton's like, unsubscribe.
Joe Biden is no longer a subscriber. Joe Biden from Scranton. Sorry, that's what got me cracking up. Even though that might be a long drive that is impractical for regular meetings, it could provide a chance to see how such groups work, and maybe even an opportunity to talk with the people who run the groups about what they do to organize and run them. If you're really lucky, you might even meet some people who traveled as far as you did and would welcome a new group nearer them. Even though it's not practical to travel that far all the time, just getting a little foundation could be a big help in organizing your own group. Consider it an investment. It's great to hear you and lustyguy back on the air after an absence. I'm glad everything is okay with you and look forward to hearing more episodes. Joe.
Yeah, and I think that was an accidental omission on our part. If you ever ask me, how can I find poly groups in your area, I have a boilerplate template that I send in response, which is basically search for the name of your area or the closest large metropolis near you and the word polyamory and see if there is a meetup group or not. So apparently we neglected to say that on that episode.
So thanks for the catch.
Yep.
Welcome to new Polyweekly Playmate, Tom.
Tom has joined us as a subscriber at the mid-level, $4.99 a month. So thank you for joining. And I was thinking about throwing in here, okay, so we've been around for a long time, and I know all the cool kids are doing Patreon, and we've actually looked into it. But, when we started, there was no Patreon. When we started looking at options for subscribers to people have us donate to us on a regular monthly basis, that was not an option. So we set it up with PayPal, which if you go to the front page of our site, Polyweekly, you can click one of the links and subscribe at the $1.99, $4.99, or $9.99 level. And so I just want to say, sorry we're not cool enough to use Patreon, but thank you if you are one of our subscribers for using the old school PayPal. Well, that about wraps it up for today's show. I want to thank our new Polyweekly Playmate, Tom, and all of our Polyweekly Playmates for your donations this month. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with poly. And the donations keep this podcast free for everyone inside and outside the community. And with that, we'll say thanks for listening. And remember,
it's not all about the sex.